Does a revocable trust avoid the probate process? Yes, your assets inside of a revocable trust do not have to go through the probate courts before you can distribute them out to the beneficiaries. The problem is going to be that when you pass away with your assets inside of a revocable trust, they are still a part of your estate, and therefore you have to pay off debts that you owe to creditors when you pass away. And so the reason assets would have to go through the probate process is if you hold them in your personal name. And so if you pass away the assets in your name, they have to go through the probate process before you can distribute them out to the beneficiaries. When you put your assets inside of a revocable trust, you're literally changing the ownership out of your name into the name of the revocable trust. And now the revocable trust owns those assets. You no longer own them. And so when you pass away with the assets inside the revocable trust, they do not have to go through the probate courts before you can distribute those assets out to your beneficiaries. Now, the reason that your trustee will have to still pay off debts that you owe is because when you are alive and you have the assets inside the revocable trust, you're filing those assets on your personal tax returns, which means that those assets are still a part of your estate. And so when you pass away with these assets as a part of your estate, even though they are no longer in your name, creditors that you owe money to can still access these assets to satisfy the debts that you have with them. And so this is what the process is going to look like when you pass away with your assets inside of a revocable trust. While you are alive, you can be the trustee and have full control over these assets. When you pass away, two things happen. Your backup trustee steps into your role as trustee, and your revocable trust turns irrevocable. Now, it's your backup trustee's responsibility to pay off the debts that you have and manage the assets inside of the trust and then distribute those assets out to your beneficiaries. The reason that a revocable trust turns irrevocable is while you are alive and you are the trustee, you have the ability to change, amend, or cancel that trust at any time. It gives you the flexibility in how you want to manage your assets. But when you pass away, they don't want to give the backup trustee the ability to change, amend, or cancel that trust at any time because there's a risk that they would manipulate that trust and the distribution of those assets to benefit them. And they don't want to do that. So what happens is when you pass away, a revocable trust will turn irrevocable. But just because a revocable trust turns irrevocable does not mean your assets have asset protection from the debts that you had when you passed away. You will still have to pay those debts off before you can distribute your assets out to the beneficiaries. And so when the backup trustee steps into your role as trustee, they have to publicly notify creditors that you have passed away. Those creditors' responsibilities to reach out to the trustee, let them know what debts you had and how much they were. The trustee will have to verify that information, and then they will pay those debts off using the assets inside of the trust and then distribute the assets out to the beneficiaries. Now, how they will prioritize your assets for paying off these debts. They will first use liquid assets and then physical assets. So, liquid assets would be things like your investment accounts or your checking and savings accounts. If there's enough liquid assets inside of your revocable trust to pay off those debts, perfectly fine. They will distribute the remaining assets out to your beneficiaries. But let's say there's not enough liquid assets to pay off all of those debts. They will then have to move on to your physical assets, start selling them to generate cash to pay off these debts. So if you have a house inside of your revocable trust, they would sell that house, generate cash, and then pay the debts off you owe to creditors, and then distribute the remaining money out to your beneficiaries. Now, let's assume that you don't have enough assets inside of your revocable trust to pay off all of the debts that you owe. Those debts would literally wipe out all of the assets inside of your revocable trust, leaving your beneficiaries with nothing. If you want asset protection from your creditors when you pass away, you can put your assets inside of an irrevocable trust, and that will also avoid the probate process. So when you pass away, the trustee will not have to publicly notify creditors that you have passed away because they are inside of the irrevocable trust, out of your name and out of your estate, and have nothing to do with you anymore. And so it has asset protection from creditors coming after those assets when you pass away. Now, a revocable trust is great if you want to account for all of your assets in one place and have all of those assets avoid the probate process. So let's talk about what assets can go in there and how you would put them in there. The assets that you can put inside of a revocable trust are going to be things like your family home, rental properties, commercial properties, land, etc. Basically any property. The other assets you can put in there are your cars, boats, etc. You can put collectibles, art, etc. You can put your cash accounts like checkings and savings. You can put investment accounts in there. You can put annuities, things like that. You can also put your insurance policies inside of there as well. You cannot put a retirement account inside of a revocable trust. The reason being is that an individual has to own a retirement account. If you take the money out of their retirement account, you're triggering the tax event for that account. And so some of the options that you have for those financial accounts is naming your revocable trust as a designated beneficiary. So things like your checking, savings, investments, retirement, and life insurance, you can name a revocable trust as designated beneficiaries on all of those accounts. And that way you have full control over how you want to manage and then distribute distribute those assets out to your beneficiaries. A big benefit of the revocable trust is that when you pass away the assets inside the revocable trust, those assets will avoid the probate courts altogether, but not once, twice. And so let's say you pass away, those assets are inside the revocable trust, you keep them inside the revocable trust to take care of your surviving spouse, and then you distribute those assets out to your kids when your surviving spouse passes away. Those assets will avoid the probate courts altogether when you pass away, and then when your surviving spouse passes away, and then distribute those assets out to your kids. The probate process can take 1 to 2 years and cost $5,000 to $15,000. So avoiding the probate process can save your family a significant amount of money. Now, when you're distributing the assets out on the back end, you have full control over how you want to distribute those assets. You could do age-based distributions for your kids. You could do event-based distributions when they graduate college, get married, buy their first home, or you can leave those assets inside of the revocable trust, reinvest them, not allow them to touch the principal of those investments, but take distributions from those investments. If you want help setting any of this up, click link in the bio, fill out the form, and schedule a time to talk to someone on our team.